In the early hours of June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, Allied forces began Operation Overlord. This operation was one of the largest amphibious invasions in history and marked a turning point in World War II against Nazi Germany. The plan was simple yet ambitious. Thousands of soldiers from the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada would storm the beaches of Normandy, France. The weather on that day was not ideal. Strong winds and rough seas made conditions difficult. Still, the Allied leadership felt it was crucial to go ahead with the invasion. After months of planning and coordination, their chance to strike had finally arrived. As dawn broke, over 156,000 troops landed on 5 beach areas codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Each beach saw intense fighting, but the determination of the soldiers pushed them forward. American forces faced particularly fierce resistance at Omaha Beach, where they encountered well-fortified German positions. The challenges were immense. Many soldiers were met with gunfire as soon as they reached the shore. The sound of artillery and the cries of wounded men filled the air. Despite the chaos, the soldiers persevered, driven by the mission at hand, to liberate Europe from Nazi control. Meanwhile, thousands of aircraft flew overhead, dropping paratroopers behind enemy lines. These airborne soldiers played a crucial role, capturing key positions and disrupting German defenses. Their bravery helped create pathways for the beach forces. As the day progressed, Allied troops began to push inland. It was not just a fight for the beaches, it was a fight for the future of Europe. The success on D-Day would lay the groundwork for further operations in France, leading to the eventual liberation of Paris and the end of Nazi occupation. Though the Allies faced heavy casualties, the determination and courage shown that day would be remembered as a symbol of hope. D-Day was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany, a pivotal moment where nations came together to fight for freedom. The planning for D-Day was a huge effort that took many months. The Allies knew they had to be clever to succeed, so they launched several deception operations. One of the most important was called Operation Fortitude. This plan aimed to confuse the Germans about where the invasion would actually take place. The Allies created fake radio traffic and even set up inflatable tanks and dummy soldiers to mislead the enemy into thinking the attack would happen somewhere else. As the days counted down to June 6th, the Allied forces were busy preparing. They practiced landing techniques and coordinated their strategies. One of the key parts of the plan was to drop paratroopers behind German lines during the night before the main invasion. These brave soldiers would land in the dark, aiming to secure important roads and bridges, making it easier for the landing troops. On the morning of D-Day, the atmosphere was tense. Naval ships unleashed heavy bombardments to soften up German defenses along the coastline. The thunderous sound of explosions echoed in the air, a mix of hope and fear. As dawn broke, the first waves of American, British, and Canadian troops began to land on the beaches of Normandy. The sight was both inspiring and alarming. Soldiers waded through water, heavily loaded with gear, while gunfire rang out around them. The shock of the incoming waves and the uncertainty of what lay ahead only fueled their determination. They were part of something much larger than themselves, fighting to change the course of history. As the paratroopers moved in and the naval bombardments continued, the true scale of the operation began to unfold. The Allies had committed to a battle that would not only test their military strength, but also their courage and resolve. Little did they know, this day would mark the beginning of the liberation of Europe from Nazi control. Despite the challenges of rough seas and the heavily fortified German defenses, the Allied troops showed incredible courage and resilience on D-Day. As they landed on the 5 beaches, Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, their determination shone through even in the face of fierce resistance. At Utah Beach, the landings went somewhat smoothly, but the soldiers still encountered enemy fire. They quickly moved to secure their positions and push inland. Meanwhile, at Gold Beach, British forces faced their own challenges, but their training and teamwork allowed them to advance steadily. However, the situation at Omaha Beach was much tougher. American troops found themselves facing heavy gunfire from well-entrenched German soldiers. Many of the landing craft were hit before they even reached the shore, resulting in significant casualties. The soldiers who made it onto the beach had to navigate through obstacles like barbed wire and mines under relentless enemy fire. Even with this devastation, the American soldiers did not give up. They bravely pushed forward, helping each other as they fought against the odds. Medics worked tirelessly to help the injured, often risking their own lives to save their comrades. The sound of bravery and chaos filled the air, as men kept moving despite the losses around them. As the battle raged on, more troops began to arrive, providing much-needed support. Gradually, American forces managed to secure a foothold at Omaha Beach. They dug in, built defenses, and prepared to push further inland. The incredible bravery and tenacity of the Allied troops that day demonstrated not just their military resolve, but also the spirit of unity and hope among nations. The fight at Omaha Beach became a symbol of sacrifice and determination, reminding everyone of the high price of freedom and the determination to overcome any obstacle. As the day went on, the Allied forces worked hard to secure their positions along the coastline. Though they had faced immense challenges, the soldiers' determination paid off. With reinforcements arriving, they were able to establish a strong beachhead. This critical step meant they could now bring in more troops and supplies to support their mission. The flow of soldiers from the landing ships continued throughout the day. Many were fresh and ready to fight, while others had already proven their courage on the beaches. As more men and resources poured in, the Allies began to organize themselves for the next phase of their operation. With the beachhead established, they started to push inland. The goal was clear: to liberate Paris and drive deeper into occupied Europe. Communication was key, and the leaders coordinated movements carefully. They understood that every step taken further inland was essential for the success of their mission. The soldiers faced ongoing threats as they moved away from the beaches. German forces, though struggling, were still present and fought back fiercely. The Allies had to remain vigilant, as the fight was far from over. Skirmishes erupted as they advanced through towns, fields, and hedgerows, each inch gained at a cost. Among the soldiers, there was a strong sense of camaraderie. They leaned on one another for support, sharing stories and boosting morale despite the fears and exhaustion. Many knew that their struggle was part of a much bigger fight for freedom across Europe. As night fell, the first day's victories were celebrated quietly. There was a sense of hope in the air, a belief that they were turning the tide against Nazi Germany. But the reality of the work still ahead was clear. The path to Paris would require continued bravery and sacrifices, as the Allies pressed on, determined to bring about the end of oppression in Europe. The successful landings at Normandy were a major turning point in the Second World War. With the Allies firmly established on the beaches, they created a new Western front that changed everything for the Germans. Up until this point, the German military was mainly focused on fighting the Soviet Union in the east. Now they had to divide their attention and resources, facing threats on two fronts. As the Allies pushed further into France, the pressure on German forces increased. They were stretched thin, trying to hold off advances from both the east and the west. This division weakened their overall strength and made it harder for them to respond to attacks effectively. The Allies moved with determination, gradually liberating towns and cities, gaining momentum every step of the way. The fighting was fierce, but the spirit among the Allied soldiers remained strong. Each town they liberated brought new hope, not just for the soldiers, but also for the civilians who had suffered under Nazi occupation. The Allies were not just fighting battles, they were bringing freedom to millions. As the weeks turned into months, the success at Normandy set the stage for further operations in Europe. With the Germans now engaged on multiple fronts, the Allies were able to coordinate their efforts more effectively. Air support and supply lines became critical in their advance, allowing them to strike deeper into German-held territory. The mounting pressure from both the Allies in the West and the Soviets in the East put the Nazis in a desperate position. They were losing ground on all sides. This shift in the war's dynamics not only boosted Allied morale, but also marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The landings at Normandy were not just about a single day of fighting. They sparked a chain reaction that would ultimately lead to the downfall of the Nazi regime. The impact of D-Day echoed throughout the rest of the war. After the successful landings in Normandy, the Allies wasted no time in advancing through France. Each week brought new victories, as towns and cities were liberated from Nazi control. Soldiers moved with purpose, driven by the desire to free the people and restore hope in a war-torn continent. As they pushed deeper into France, the Allies faced fierce battles, but their determination never wavered. The liberation of Paris in August 1944 was a particularly significant moment, filled with celebrations and a renewed spirit among the Allies and the French people alike. This victory demonstrated that the tide was turning, and it inspired further resistance against the Nazis across Europe. With each liberated country, the Allies gained strength and momentum. The push into Germany began, and by early 1945, the end was in sight. The brutal fighting continued, but the idea that freedom was within reach kept the soldiers motivated. Finally, on May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally, marking a significant victory for the Allies and the end of the war in Europe. D-Day is remembered not just for its immediate military success, but also as a crucial turning point in history. It symbolized the beginning of the end for tyranny in Europe. The sacrifices made on that day and the weeks that followed reshaped global politics for years to come. The aftermath of the war led to the establishment of international alliances aimed at preventing future conflicts and promoting peace. The courage shown on D-Day and in the battles that followed became a lasting symbol of the fight against oppression. It reminded the world of the importance of standing up for freedom and working together for a better future.